Hi, and welcome to On and Off, our podcast covering the on-premise and off-premise beverage alcohol industry. I'm Melissa Dowling, editor of Cheers.
And I'm Kyle Swartz, editor of Beverage Dynamics magazine. Today, we're going to be talking with food and beverage lawyer Oren Bitan, a partner at Buchalter in Los Angeles.
Oren works with alcohol and cannabis businesses on a wide variety of issues, including regulatory advice, product liability, distribution agreements, false advertising, financing, intellectual property, and commercial disputes. So, welcome, Oren, and thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's start with an easy question right now, or maybe it won't be easy depending on what you bring up. But what are the three biggest issues facing the beverage alcohol industry today, legally?
Well, I think the biggest one is the decline in consumption. It's no secret to anyone that drinking is way down. There was this spike during the pandemic when people were pantry loading and consumption spiked, purchasing spiked, and alcohol companies assumed that was sort of the new normal and invested in new lines of production, supply chain, inventory, and it really dropped down dramatically as the pandemic continued and people kind of resumed their normal lives. I think the big macro shift then became pretty evident that younger people are not drinking as much. People are focused more on health and wellness. They're not going back into the office, so they're not around each other as much. So there's less opportunities to drink. So overall, there's been a big decline, and it's caused some seismic activity in the industry.
Yeah, I mean, we see some lawsuits going on with some of these brands and companies that are going through financial hardships. I don't want to start naming names because we're not here to shame anybody, but you must be following certain whiskey brands go through very public bankruptcy
Yeah,
bankruptcy proceedings. I'm sure this is what you're talking about on the
yeah,
hand.
yeah. There's a very big receivership now in Tennessee, Tennessee whiskey that I have some, tangential involvement with, but yeah, massive kind of downturn, unfortunate that running through $100 million and not having much to show for it is certainly cause for concern.
Do you think we're going to see more of this in the year or so to come? Are we going to see more companies kind of go through this financial hardship and unfortunate legal proceedings?
I think so. I mean, Stoli just converted from a Chapter 11 bankruptcy to a Chapter 7 bankruptcy. I think there's maybe some other things going on there. The Russian government and cyber attacks and some sort of international intrigue separate and apart from the alcohol business. But they do have Kentucky Owl, which is a great bourbon. I don't represent them, but have enjoyed drinking it. And so that's the conversion to Chapter 7 means they're now liquidating. So they're selling all those brands. And I just read, I think it was in Forbes or Financial Times, there's now the largest unsold inventory of alcohol there's been in a long time. And it's, I think, will cause more stress on companies.
Certainly agree. That was one issue. You had two more?
Yeah, the one interesting one, there's a lot of push and pull in the industry touching on how the youth aren't drinking as much. The last Surgeon General under Biden threatened to add cancer warning labels to alcohol. And so, like you would see on a cigarette, there's a big warning label, this may cause cancer and some other, health effects. Nothing happened with that. I think that likely would require an act of Congress. Congress didn't act. And now we have a new president, of course, and who apparently doesn't drink. But his new Surgeon General, Dr. Oz, other than Diet Coke, his new Surgeon General, Dr. Oz, just came out with new health guidelines that removed the strict, you should only be drinking, 2 drinks, so on and so forth, to just generally limiting, his word was limit, the amount of consumption, a general sort of, drink responsibly kind of thing. And also citing to some of the blue zone countries. The one that I thought of was Greece. They're festive. They have ouzo. They drink wine. It's part of the culture. It's part of European culture. Even at a young age in Italy and France, there's wine at the dinner table. It's part of it. No one's necessarily binge drinking. So I thought that was an interesting shift from one to the other. And there's now a push in some corners of the alcohol space. We should be able to promote the health benefits of alcohol. Not only is it, not unhealthy, but it's actually healthy. It's, antioxidants, cardiovascular health. And then there's sort of the Scott Galloway push of these young people aren't socializing, they're depressed, and they're not drinking. They need a social lubricant here to get going. So it's an interesting time in the industry from that standpoint.
I'm not sure anyone's ever said something on our podcast that I agree with more than everything you just said about sort of like mandating or suggesting that people drink more as, as to improve their mental health. I mean, I'm half joking, but also half not joking. It just goes to something I've been saying a lot this month. We're recording this podcast in January, at the end of January, and I personally think dry January is the two dumbest words I've ever heard in my life. I mean, let's just take something that makes you feel better and helps you relax and unwind at the end of the day, and let's just throw it up. We're just going to torture ourselves for no reason. I think if you do dry January, the next thing you should do is no sleep September. Why stop at drinking? Just get rid of sleep. Don't sleep for a whole month. You'll feel great. It's great.
Well,
take things you like and get rid of them. That's a great way to go through life.
right, especially one of the harshest months of the year.
Exactly.
But we're seeing a backlash to that in the on-premise. People are promoting wet January, with drink specials. Like, come on in. If you're not doing dry January, we're the place to be. So, and I think people too, you hear a lot about the performative abstinence that it's just, can you just maybe drink less or just, do you have to make a big show of it? So I think there is a backlash to that, but it doesn't change that people are drinking less, from the people kind of aging out to the young people with no money or no social skills.
Have you seen that meme that's been going around social media where it's a guy at a bar and the waitress asks if he wants a drink and he starts to say he's not drinking for January, and it just clips to this like moving logo that says nobody cares. It's kind of how I feel. I have a friend who does dry January every single year, and he does it for approximately 2.5 weeks because that's how long it takes myself and another friend to get him to have a drink.
Right.
Because it is performative. I mean, God bless him. This is a guy who goes to a freaking cigar and whiskey bar in New Haven to do work every afternoon. Like, it's not that hard to get this guy that could then have a whiskey with his cigar. I don't know. It's so silly. And you're right. We talk a lot about the younger generation and what's going on with them and why aren't they drinking and why are they so depressed and anxious. And they talk about alcohol making them more anxious. And, the term they use, and I've said this a lot on the podcast, is hangxiety. Portmanteau of two words there, hangover and anxiety, obviously. And they think that if they cut out alcohol, they're going to be less anxious. I'll tell you, nobody seems more anxious to me than Gen Zers. So maybe they need more alcohol. Maybe they have it wrong. Maybe alcohol will help them relax. I don't know. I mean, it's a weird thing to tell people to drink. It is. It's a weird thing to recommend culturally in America. There are obviously other cultures that promote it, like you said, as a natural part of their culture. But here in America, we don't, unfortunately, and it seems to be sliding in the wrong direction. We can suggest it, but we certainly can't mandate it. We can't. I was going to make a joke, and I couldn't think of a way to bring it up, that we were going to legally mandate that Gen Z drink alcohol. Like, can we get Trump to do a presidential decree on that? Like, from now on, you have to have at least one drink every day. So I don't know. Is there anything legally that could help with this besides, like you said, maybe finding a way to promote some of the positive aspects?
Well, I think, yeah, it's cultural, but it comes from the top. The Surgeon General, I think what he says matters. If there's a recognition, I think they discovered a beer bottle in Haifa in Israel, a 13,000-year-old beer bottle. Humans have been consuming alcohol for a very long time, and it's ingrained in our ceremonies, in our rituals, in our culture. I think there's a reason for that. The pendulum always swings back and forth, and we're at this sort of generational point where these kids are kind of doing something different. Um, so I have small children, they're Gen Alpha. We'll see, I'm my own personal viewpoint. I think the Europeans sort of have it right in the sense of it's not taboo, it's not binge drinking, it's somewhere in between, right? So it's just a natural sort of part of culture and of convivial, ceremonies and situations. And maybe we just need some more of that.
I have Gen
So,
Alpha kids as well. I have a daughter who my oldest is 4, and you know what she calls my enormous whiskey collection? She calls it Dada juice.
Dad is happy when he drinks dad juice.
And like we're making jokes here, but this is a conversation I have a lot with people in the alcohol industry, such as yourself with children, is how do you teach kids about alcohol properly? And I have this conversation several times a month, and I hear a lot. It's like, as much as I make the data juice joke, it's you got to understand and teach them to respect alcohol in a manner. It is something to be enjoyed, like good food, good anything. And so it is
Yeah.
about teaching perhaps the positive aspect of alcohol, which I think is really what we're all trying to say here.
Yeah.
yeah. So let's talk about the cannabis beverage market or cannabis in general. What do you see happening with that?
Yeah, so Buchalter, I'm the head of the cannabis group, and we were one of the first business law firms to get into the California space right when it became legal. And there was tremendous upswing in investment and then tremendous downswing in distress. And in California, we're still in the distressed aspect. But the bright spot was hemp beverages. And it kind of fell through this legal loophole. And it was under the Farm Bill, and it wasn't really cannabis, and it didn't have that much THC in it. And all of a sudden, you could buy it at, Total Wine. Um, and then the pendulum swung back where there's now a threat to close the loophole in the Farm Bill and shut it down. And we're now on basically a 10-month clock for this loophole to expire. And it seems like there's some movement to preserve it because it is this growing emerging market. It's a bright spot in the cannabis industry. It's a bright spot in the overall sort of altered state beverage industry. It's not alcohol, but it's something, else. And why do we want to kill that? It's young entrepreneurs are having success. People, youngsters who don't want to have an alcoholic drink, don't mind having one of these. So it's grown tremendously and it is pretty low THC. I do agree there needs to be some regulation. We need to know what's exactly inside the beverage and what it does to us when we drink it, and what's sort of a legal limit, impaired driving, all that sort of thing. But I think it'd be a shame to allow it to die as quickly as it grew.
Yeah, I'm nodding vigorously here. And this is something we've covered extensively on our podcast. As you might imagine, we're very much in favor of the cannabis derived THC drink industry, as you just described. And yeah, we don't want to see it die out. We are very worried about the closing of the loophole. We do. I was literally just editing an article on this topic before I got onto the podcast. And it seems like there's been some movement, as you suggested, to perhaps extend the closing of the loophole past the 10-month mark to maybe more like 2 years, to kind of give everyone a chance to get some regulation together. We're complete agreement of that. Perhaps I don't know, did you have an opinion on milligram cap? I've heard 5 milligrams said, I've heard 10 milligrams said. Here in Connecticut, where Melissa and I are based, it's actually capped, I believe, at 2.5 or 3, which I
Mm.
even think is perhaps a little extreme. I would be fine with 10. But of course, as obviously and as we said a million times on this podcast, you travel out west or in the Midwest, and there is no cap. And you can
Yeah.
buy THC products off the shelf that have 50 milligrams, even 100 milligrams, which, I would put me in a hospital, and I'm someone who uses these products. So I don't, your thoughts on perhaps a THC milligram cap?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to a cap. I agree that some of the products on the shelves are just, it doesn't need to be that strong. What that cap is, I'm not sure. 2.5 maybe seems a little low. 50 or 100 is for sure too high. So yeah, I think there needs to be some oxygen. There needs to be some development and research so we can figure it out. It's
Yeah.
been sort of taboo for so long. The scientific research hasn't been there. With rescheduling, now we'll get more research and testing, and we'll kind of figure out what kind of metabolism synthesizes it differently. And who's it best for? Um, and hopefully with a longer leash and a longer lifespan, the schedule to rescheduling kind of catches up with the research, and then we can figure out the sweet spot there.
I hope so. Absolutely. I'm very happy about the president doing the rescheduling. I think that was long overdue. And yeah, I mean, all the more reason to extend the closing of the loophole to give the research some time to catch up. One other fear I have here with the shift with the potential closing of the loophole as this gets kicked back to the state level even more is, and I have a friend who works policy for the governor in our state of Connecticut, and I was having a chat with him about it. And he said something that I'm hearing from people nationwide is that this might end up taking the beverages out of the liquor stores and putting them into the dispensaries, which I think everyone in the industry believes is a mistake. And I personally think it's a mistake. Nobody goes to a dispensary looking to buy a cannabis beverage. They
Yeah.
belong in the liquor stores, and that the liquor stores are making money off of them too at a time where, obviously, as we've mentioned, alcohol is down, where THC beverages are up. So this has become a rare bright spot during some difficult years. So it's a lose lose lose. I was wondering your opinion on this or anything that you saw or thought about this.
Yeah, I agree. The licensed industry has such a tough time because they're treated separately than anything else on the market. And you have to go to this dedicated store and you have to make a special trip as opposed to going into Total Wine or BevMo. Um, it'd be a shame for that to get rolled back. And just, I think yesterday or a couple of days ago, the United Center in Chicago is going to be the first venue of that scale to serve cannabis beverages. So I think it's tough to go backwards in that sense.
Yeah.
Consumer sentiment and taste is adopting it, and it's just going to march forward.
That's how I feel too. The genie's out of the bottle. I'm
Yeah,
cautiously optimistic about this. I really am. And that's not, I'm glad you brought that up. I love that we're seeing these products come to the on premise
yeah.
channel. I love that we're seeing more and more of that. Just in general, I'm in favor of it. Any concerns legally about that? You have people consuming THC in public spaces, then they got to go home somehow. I mean, it's no different than drinking, of course. I'm just wondering your
Right.
opinion on that.
Yeah, same thing. I think in moderation, knowing we don't have the science to sort of tell us, oh, it's one or two or three or whatever it is. But I think for the sophisticated consumer, drink in moderation, be cautious, and proceed accordingly. There's a new bar. I'm in Los Angeles, and there's a new bar in Chinatown, which is kind of a cool part of town. Total no alcohol bar at
Hmm.
all. So it's like hemp and THC beverage is a perfect addition to that.
Yeah.
Um, and in California, the other sort of oddity is for the on-premise, we have West Hollywood was the first city to really push on-premise cannabis cafes. And the big prohibition is serving alcohol in the same place as a THC beverage, or joints or whatever it is. So I think that sort of needs to go away. Obviously, the United Center in Chicago, they're not going to stop selling beer, so it'll be sold alongside it. I don't think, and hopefully nothing catastrophic happens, and people will come to the understanding this is okay. This will be fine.
I'm always so jealous of the West Coast whenever we talk about cannabis because you guys are just like 10 years ahead of us in terms of cannabis culture at all times. East Coast, we're catching up, but your West Coast is always, you see what's coming on the West Coast and then eventually reaches us here on the East Coast.
Yeah. So speaking of Hollywood, what do you think that the celebrity beverage endorsements will still be a strong driver for growth, especially as, the economy kind of has been softening?
Yeah, I think so. I think so. I think it's culturally driven. Celebrities are as more popular than ever, and there have been some great successes. So there have been some failures. Preparing for this, I was curious. I looked at, which were the ones that sort of didn't do well. It was like Danny DeVito's Limoncello. Great guy, amazing actor, but probably not someone you associate with an alcohol brand. And I
Especially
think,
limoncello.
right, limoncello. I don't know. There's a big market for that in the first place. And then Mariah Carey's champagne or something like that. But
Oh,
otherwise,
I think it was an Irish cream liqueur or
Is that
something
what?
like
Yes,
that.
Okay,
Irish
thank
cream.
you,
That's what it
Black
was. Thank you,
Irish.
Melissa.
thank you, thank
Yes.
you.
Like again, where's the connection there? That's, I mean, it's a good point. Both of them. That's just not naturally what you think of. Why didn't Danny DeVito do some like easy drinking like beer that play on It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, right? He
There you
should have
go.
had some kind of like a back alley beer and a like a
Right.
brown bag kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's a weird choice, limoncello.
He had a nice afternoon in Sorrento and was inspired, and the rest is history.
So
But yeah, they're obviously, the huge successes, Clooney and the hip hop side of the business, astronomical, Dwayne Johnson now launching. So I think, yeah, yes, it's people love to associate themselves with celebrity. Celebrities are probably at an all-time high as far as popularity, and it's working. So might as well seize it.
another one with that is athletes getting into it, which is, for a long time, traditionally, they did not advertise alcohol too much during sports, perhaps beer, but certainly not like spirits and wine. But now you have, NBA players, Dwayne Wade. I'm sorry, and I'm blanking on the other gentleman's name who just got traded, but he has a wine as well. Dwayne Wade has a wine. You see these athletes launching alcohol brands now, which presents kind of an interesting conundrum because, again, these are people that children are really looking up to. Not that children don't look up to actors and actresses as well, but certainly athletes and have a large following among underage people. And just your thought on how that might play out.
Yeah, LeBron and Dwayne Wade are famous for enjoying their fine wines, on an off night. So why not? It's part of the lifestyle. I mean, you can smoke weed now and be a basketball player. So why why not a glass of fine wine? They have tough schedules. They're running around all the time. They need to wind down.
And
It'll help
I just
get the
want
kids into alcohol.
It's true. I just want to say real quickly, just because he was a 40 under 40 member this year for our magazine, I felt terrible. I forgot his name. I Googled it real quickly. CJ McCollum.
Ah,
Apologies
okay.
for getting that one. Great shooting guard there.
Yep. Yep. It's like Coppola. He was a filmmaker, got into wine.
Mm.
Why not be a Renaissance man?
So I think we have time for one more. So I would just ask, do you see any regulatory or supply chain challenges that, the current administration might impose on the industry?
Well, tariffs, I think, are the big one. And that's what everyone's watching for. How is that going to impact the industry? Certainly hurting US exports of alcohol to Europe. That's been tough. And the same way coming back. So I think tariff is the big one. I don't think it's been at the scale as the macro impact of slump demand. That's a big one. Obviously, rescheduling for cannabis on the hemp beverage. And then, yeah, Dr. Oz's, I think, Surgeon General movement there is, under the executive branch and potentially has some positive impact.
It's hard to really get a gauge on the tariffs right now. Just they're on, they're off, they're on, they're off, they're
Yeah,
threatened, they're rescinded, they're threatened, they're rescinded. I don't know, it's tough. But chaos. Chaos is a business dampener.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
That's why gold is at an all-time high and silver is going crazy and everything's all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you again, Oren, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you both.
Absolutely. And thanks to all of you out there for listening to another episode of On and Off. Please do join us next time when we'll talk about yet another fascinating topic that spans the retail and restaurant worlds. Until then, cheers.
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 If you enjoyed the On and Off podcast, please hit the subscribe button. Also, you can find more great content at cheersonline.com and beveragedynamics.com, including recipes, product reviews, and interviews with the movers and shakers of the beverage alcohol industry. You can also sign up for our free weekly e-newsletters for both publications on our websites. Cheers!